Welcome to Module 2 of Chapter 1. In this module, we are going to talk about parasites and parasitism and the Linnaean Classification System. This presentation aims to describe the relationship between various organisms and the types of parasitism. It also aims to describe the different types of parasitic zoonosis and discuss the Linnaean system of classification. Each parasite has its own life cycle. The life cycle is the development of a parasite through its various life stages. Every parasite has at least one definitive host and may have one or more intermediate hosts. The definitive host is the host that harbors the adult, sexual, or the mature stages of the parasite. For example, the dog is the definitive host of the canine heartworm, the Rufilaria immitis. In this diagram, the life cycle of the canine heartworm, the Rufilaria immitis, is shown. So as you can see here, the dog is the definitive host of the canine heartworm, the Rufilaria immitis, meaning that the adult, sexual, or the mature stages of the parasite are present in this host. Parasites with indirect life cycle may have one or more intermediate hosts. Intermediate hosts are the host that harbors the larval, juvenile, immature, or the sexual stages of the parasite. The intermediate host transfers the parasite from one definitive host to another. An example of an intermediate host is the female mosquito, and it is considered to be the intermediate host for the parasitic heartworm, the Rufilaria immitis. In this diagram, you can see the life cycle of the Rufilaria immitis. As you can see here, before the parasite reaches its definitive host, which is the dog, the larval stages, the asexual or the immature stages of the parasite first undergoes its development in the female mosquito. So the female mosquito is the intermediate host of the parasite. In a special type of intermediate host, a parasite does not undergo any development, but instead remains arrested or encysted within the host tissues. This host is called the transport or the paratenic host. So the larvae in the paratenic host remain in the suspended state until the definitive host eats the transport host. Once within the definitive host, the larvae wake up, establish an infection, migrate to their predilection site, and grow up to adult parasites within the definitive host. So an example of a paratenic host are the earthworm. In this case, we have the Ascaridia galli, a parasitic roundworm belonging to the phylum Nematoda. So the definitive host of Ascaridia galli are the domestic fowl, and the transport host of this parasite are the earthworms. Another is the reservoir host. Reservoir host is a vertebrate host in which a parasite or disease occurs in nature and is a source of infection for humans and domesticated animals. So an example of the reservoir host are the wild wolves and coyotes. So these animals can serve as reservoir hosts for the filariasis, which is a type of heartworm infection. So heartworms may develop in the heart of wild wolves and coyotes. Wolves and coyotes may be reservoir hosts for heartworm infection. The infection may be spread from the wolf or coyote to the family pet by the mosquito intermediate host. Note that some parasites can serve as intermediate host for other parasites as well as being parasites themselves. So for example, the mosquito feeds off animals and is thus a parasite, but also acts as an intermediate host to the parasite that causes heartworm disease. So this is an example of the life cycle of the heartworm or the Rufilaria immitis. So as you can see here, Mosquito is considered to be the intermediate host now for the transmission of the heartworm infection to dogs. At the same time, the mosquito can also serve as a parasite itself, no, because it feeds on the dog's blood. So another is a vector. A vector is defined as any agent that carries infectious organisms between animals. It can either be a mechanical vector or a cyclical vector. A mechanical vector is an arthropod that carries the infectious agent from one vertebrate host to another without any development in its body. Example of this is the tabanus, transmitting the protozoa Trypanosoma evansi. Tabanus is considered to be a mechanical vector because although it carries the Trypanosoma evansi within it, but the parasite Trypanosoma evansi does not develop within its body. Another is the cyclical vector. So when we say cyclical vector, that is a vector in which the parasite undergoes development or multiplication before being transmitted to the next host. So an example of this are the ticks transmitting the hemoprotozoan parasites. So this is a diagram showing an example of a cyclical vector. The tick is considered to be a cyclical vector because within its body, the parasite, which is the protozoan parasite, undergoes developmental stages. So among the developmental stages that the parasite undergoes now within its tick host, now for this particular example are gamogony and sporogony. Another type of parasite are the homocenous or the monocenous parasite. This is a parasite that will infect only one type of host. So an example of this parasite is the Eimeria tenella. So the Eimeria tenella is a species of Eimeria. Eimeria is a protozoa that causes hemorrhagic cecal coccidiosis in young poultry. So this parasite now is found worldwide. So this is an example of homocenous or the monocenous parasite. So another is the stenocenous parasite. A stenocenous parasite is a parasite with a narrow host range. Example is the Eimeria tenella. It will only infect chickens. So that is why it is a stenocenous parasite. So in this diagram shows the predilection site of Eimeria tenella in the chicken digestive tract. So it attacks mainly the cecum. And this is the oocyst of the Eimeria tenella. We also have the urocenous parasite. So this is a parasite having a very broad host range. Example of this is the protozoan parasite Toxoplasma gondii, which infects more than 300 species of warm-blooded vertebrates. So examining the life cycle of the Toxoplasma gondii, you can see here that the parasite can infect different types of warm-blooded animals, such as we have ungulates, and birds as well as rodents and also humans with different routes of transmission. Another very important terminology in veterinary parasitology is zoonosis. The zoonosis is defined as any disease or infection that is naturally transmissible from vertebrate animals to humans. So this is according to the WHO 2020. It is also defined as infection or disease that is transmissible from animals to humans under natural conditions. So an example of a zoonotic infection is toxoplasmosis. So toxoplasmosis is an infection, a protozoan infection that can be transmitted from the vertebrate host or vertebrate animals to humans. Based on the reservoir host, zoonosis can be classified as anthropozoonosis. When we say anthropozoonosis, that is zoonotic diseases, or those are zoonotic diseases primarily transmitted from lower vertebrate animals to human being. So the maintenance cycle for these diseases are between animal to animal, and the zoonotic cycle is from animal to human. So an example of the zoonotic diseases under this category are leptospirosis, anthrax, and rabies. So an example of anthropozoonosis is rabies. So rabies is considered to be an anthropozoonotic disease now because the maintenance cycle of the disease now occurs in these lower vertebrate animals, and it can be naturally transmitted from these animals to humans. Another classification based on reservoir host is the zooanthroponosis. So zooanthroponosis are zoonotic diseases which normally pass from human to other vertebrate animals. So the other name of this, the zooanthroponosis, is also known as the reverse zoonotic disease transmission because normally, when we say zoonosis, that is a disease now coming from animals to humans. But in this case, it is the reverse. Now that is from animals to from humans to animals. So the maintenance cycle for this disease occurs between human to human, and the zoonotic potential occurs between human to animals. So recent examples of zooanthroponosis include methicillin-resistant Staphylococcus aureus, influenza A virus, Cryptosporidium parvum, and Ascaris lumbricoides. So these particular diseases are present in humans, and they can be transmitted to animals, and they are called as zooanthroponosis. Another type of zoonosis is metazoonosis. This is a zoonosis that requires both a vertebrate and an invertebrate host for completion of the life cycle of the infective organism. An example of a parasitic disease that exhibits metazoonosis is the visceral leishmaniasis. So visceral leishmaniasis is a parasitic disease found in tropical and subtropical areas that mainly affects children under 5 years of age. The causative agent of visceral leishmaniasis is the protozoan leishmania. To be able to complete its life cycle, this protozoa needs an invertebrate host, the sandfly, as well as dogs and wild canid for it not to be able to complete its life cycle. Another type of zoonosis is the saprozoonosis. This type of zoonotic disease requires an inanimate substance for completion of life cycle in addition to vertebrate or invertebrate hosts. An example of a zoonotic disease that exhibits saprozoonosis is the cutaneous larva migrans. So cutaneous larva migrans is a parasitic skin infection caused by the hookworm larvae that usually infest cats, dogs, and other animals. So humans can be infected with the larvae by walking barefoot on sandfly beaches or contacting moist, soft soil that has been contaminated with animal feces. We also have cyclozoonosis. So these are infections which require at least 2 vertebrate hosts, one of which may be human, to complete their life cycle. Example of this is the protozoan parasite, no, Toxoplasma gondii. So Toxoplasma gondii has 2 distinct life cycles. The sexual cycle occurs only in cats, which is considered to be the definitive host. The asexual cycle occurs in other mammals, including humans and various strains of birds. So this type of zoonotic disease is an example of cyclozoonosis. Let's now proceed to the Linnaean system of classification. So this system was developed in the mid-1700s by the Swedish botanist named Carolus Linnaeus. So this system classified all organisms as either animals or plants. It also gave all organisms a 2-part Latin. The Linnaean classification system is still being used today. It is based on the taxonomy classification of organisms. So when we say taxonomy, that is the science of naming and classifying organisms. We are also going to use taxon in this type of system. When we say taxon, that is a group of organisms in a classification system. So the Linnaean classification scheme works in the following manner. Several million species of animals, plants, and fungi, protozoa, and algae live on the earth. These creatures may have different common names in different regions of the world. A common name may refer to different organisms in different places. The solution to this problem was to give each organism a scientific name. So, scientific name is a system of binomial nomenclature. In taxonomy, binomial nomenclature, which is also known as the two-name naming system or binary nomenclature, is a formal system of naming species of living things by giving each a name composed of two parts. So it uses Latin words. When we are going to examine the etymology of this binomial nomenclature, we can see that the bi here means two, nomial is name, nomen means naming, and the clature is the system. So the bi here means that the scientific name is composed of two parts. The first part is the genus and the second part is the species. So we have here an example of scientific name. So this is the Rana tigrina. This is the scientific name of the Indian bullfrog. So the Rana here represents the genus while the tigrina represents the species. So the first word, as you can notice here, the first word is capitalized, and this is the genus. The genus indicates the group to which a particular type of animal belongs. So the second word, the species, is not capitalized. It is the specific epithet and indicates the type of animal itself. So we have here some rules in binomial nomenclature. So we have here the scientific names must be from Latin or Greek roots. The first letter of the genus name should be capitalized. The first letter of the species name is not capitalized. And in writing the scientific name, it should be italics when it is typed or printed, or underlined when it is handwritten. So we have here an example. The Ursus arctus is the scientific name of the brown bear. It can also be written as U.arctus. So the names must be approved by an international naming authority. So some of the advantages of binomial nomenclature are, so these are universal and recognized worldwide, and they provide information regarding the generic name and the family relationships. So every organism can be classified using the following classification schemes, the Linnaean Classification Scheme. So we have here from the largest to the smallest. We have 7 levels. We have from the kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, and species. So similar species are grouped together in the same genus. Similar genera, the plural for genus, are grouped together in the same family. Similar families are grouped together in the same order. Similar orders are grouped together in the same class. Similar classes are grouped together in the same phylum. And similar phyla are grouped together in the same kingdom. So therefore, this is the classification scheme for dogs. For the species, we have Canis familiaris. This is the scientific name for a dog. For the genus, it is Canis. So this includes animals like dogs, wolves, coyotes, but not foxes. For the family, so dogs belong to the family Canidae. So these are animals in the family, include dogs, wolves, coyotes, and foxes. The dogs belong to the order Carnivora. So dogs are in this order because they eat meat as their main food source. They belong to the class Mammalia because they make milk for their young. They have ears and have hair. They belong to the phylum Chordata. So this phylum includes, they belong to the phylum Chordata because they have a spinal cord. And of course, they belong to the phylum or to the kingdom Animalia. The Linnaean classification system contains the following 5 kingdoms. First, planta or plants. Second, animalia or animals. Third, protista, unicellular organisms. Fourth, Monera or algae, and fungi. Veterinary parasitology is concerned with only 2 of these kingdoms as true parasites of domesticated animals. The first is the kingdom Animalia, which contains platyhelminthes, flatworms, trematodes or flukes, cystodes or tapeworms, and nematodes or roundworms. It also includes acanthocephalans, annelids, and arthropods. Arthropods include insects, mites, ticks, spiders, and other jointed appendages. The second is the kingdom Protista, which contains the protozoans, which are unicellular organisms. For the exercise 1, so you need to answer the evaluation for these first 2 presentations, introductory presentations, following this link. So note that the link will be restricted to users in the University of Southern Mindanao. The deadline for this exercise 1 is today at 12 noon. For exercise 2, you are going to make a YouTube shorts by following this link. And the link will also be restricted to users of the University of Southern Mindanao. And the deadline for this exercise number 2 will be next week, Friday at 3 p.m.